Hi. In today's video, we are going to discuss about how to write iteration goals followed by the PA objectives like programming incremental objectives whenever we are working on the agile planning. As we all know, implementing agile planning for any application development at the team level or the business unit levels or else at the organization level, like enterprise implementation, enterprise transformation of the organizations is essentially important. In this regard, understanding about writing the iteration goals followed by PA objectives are very important. In regard to that, one should understand people, whoever wants to write these iteration goals as well as PA objectives. These are all something required to have a focus and as well as having a discipline to achieve a proper agility transformation. Because the kind of objectives which are not something, I don't say it's a bad objective, but the kind of objectives which are not majorly focusing on the goals are one of the most common reasons where most of the organizations stop using all that. So by keeping this context into an account, how to write the objectives, PA objectives effectively. At the same time, the kind of iteration goals, what is that we want to achieve in order to the scale down the versions of objectives, right? So all these things is what I will learning in today's video. Whenever before we are going to write any iterations on as well as the PA objectives, we have to understand why are we writing them, as it is already common for organizations to treat objectives as summaries of the features or the stories, where majorly items commits to into the programming increment as well as the iterations. But in most of the conditions where it has been misunderstanding of the objectives of the major purpose, what is that we want to achieve. Along with that, understanding over the objectives represents agile teams to commit to the deliverables of the product increments as well as the iterations. Along with this, it also creates a kind of feedback loop from the business to the teams, where this loops will ensure both parties to understand the organization vision, all that. So in order to understand this, wherein we need to know about two different things. The first point, the first point is to have an idea over the teams can confirm their understanding of the business followed by businesses or businesses, I can say businesses. Desired outcomes is what one thing which we have to be seen with. This is one thing which we have to be make sure of, right? So business can confirm their understanding of the business followed by the desired outcomes is what one has to know. Along with this, the kind of business, what is that we're transforming, businesses can clarify or further refine its value priorities. Right. So these are the two major things which normally we need to understand with. Because during the iteration or PI plannings, teams neither commit to all the features brought to the PI planning nor to whole features. So it is important for us to understand what outcomes of the features to create. This gives each and everyone to have a chance to wait in on those outcomes easily. So when there is a PI planning, which normally we do, which majorly gives business its prioritized list of the agile release list to the agile release trends like arts and all that. Then teams on the art sequences, those stories and as well as features based on the priorities as well as the capacities, whatever are really needed. In this process, teams will only commit to a subset of the business request where this PI objectives ensure teams commits to the proper subset of the business requests. Along with that, the kind of business value scores and as well as conversations with business owners, as well as the key stakeholders also support team commitments. In connect to this, teams can also gather the kind of sequence stories and as well as features into the delivery plan so that it leads to business outcomes, which communicates these plans through the objectives and as well as summarizes the business and technical goals in the kind of language of the business which it understands. Followed by this, it's also much more important than the kind of summary of the planned work, what is that we were doing. Because we have to identify that well-written objectives also creates an opportunity for alignment in any of the business. Because if we don't do a proper alignment over the business objectives and goals towards reaching the business agility, then writing down the objectives doesn't have any value at all. Along with this, we need to know about the team should be able to connect their features and as well as stories to the highest value of the objectives, which makes it easier for the teams to see if they are doing the most valuable work first. If not, they need to address the kind of priorities or the technical dependencies, which are essentially important. Now, next thing we need to know about to whom are these iterations and PI objectives will be for. To have this understanding of the objectives for what for, we must also consider who the object is for, because normally teams don't write the iterations or PI objectives for the product managers or for the product owners. Basically, the people who manages the backlogs, right? So all these things and all, right? So what work for they for, right? So at the same time, team has to write the objectives for the business owners and the key stakeholders. Wherein objectives the communicates which business outcomes the teams contributes to and why they matter, right? So teams they has to understand the deeper purpose behind the work, which will be helpful in engaging the employees, all that. But when we are going to write a meaningful iterations and PI objectives from the context of implementation by imparting this DevOps environments, all that, wherein if we try to understand some examples of PA objectives from the fields, something like, for example, implementing Jenkins, right? So because Jenkins is a kind of integration which normally we do when we are working on DevOps environment. So that is first thing. At the same time, build APIs, right? So whatever the application programming interfaces, at least two APIs can be built upon. Like either it could be RESTful APIs or SOAP protocols, all that. So building APIs is required. At the same time, building a Database even, this is also something required. Followed by this, designing a template is also essentially required. So these are the major aspects of an examples of PI objectives from any of the fields can be taken. Make sure if this is being implemented, including this DevOps environment or all that. So these kind of examples will not be effectively communicate to the business outcomes to the work produces. Additionally, these kind of examples and objectives are majorly written solely from the perspective of development, as well as for the engineering teams, and have no connection to why the work matters, right? So if the objectives just reinstate the names of the features, they're waste of time and energy, all that. But first of all, when we want to write objectives and all, these objectives should have a technique normally we follow, which is called SMART, right? So the kind of technique, what is that we will be using is called SMART, right? So SMART technique or SMART objectives will be as follows. The first point, S stands for specific, because whatever the objectives are we going to write must be specific enough so that people will understand this better, right? So objectives must be specific. Whereas M stands for measurable, because whatever the objectives are we going to write should be in a state of measurable condition. At the same time, there should not be any kind of exaggeration. Achievable, right? So this is also required. So we have to we should able in a position to achieve these things as well. So that is also something important. Achievable condition, those are, because there should not be any exaggerations or something, right? Whatever is possible for us to achieve, those must be the objectives. And objectives must be relevant, right? Because there is a similarity over, there is a connect over the objectives, what is that we are writing. So that relevancy is also required. Followed by this, last but not least, timely objectives, understanding as well as writing timely objectives is also something essentially required. So these are the major areas which we need to understand from the context of SMART. This is a kind of technique we use, like specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, timely, right? So these are the techniques which normally we need to use when we are writing down any objectives in the real world of this agile planning, all that. Because the kind of activities we are going to perform, what will be doing here, at the same time scope, what are all the boundaries of the work we will be touching upon. At the same time, beneficiaries, like who is the intended recipients of the new work, what is that we are going to deliver. Followed by this user value, like why does this work matters to the new user, and how and what value it is enhancing for a user, apart from the work, what is that they were working on now. Not all that, but we need to understand the business value as well. What is the business value, and why does this work matters to the business, to what extent is this being used. So business value should also be knowing, right? So these are the different things which we have to be taken into an account. These are all something which is essentially matters when we are working on something, right? So this is something which we have to be more understandable and more clear with. If you take an examples of these components, whatever the activities are we talking about. So activity is something like create, implement, define, design, enable, modify, etc. When we're talking about the scope, it could be an application or APIs, mobiles, web databases, dashboards, etc. When we talk about the beneficiaries, like either it could be customers or end users, system teams, mobile users, all that. User values may be the system must be faster, better, cheaper, and enhanced new features, all that. Business value, it can be like reducing the call times, or increasing the sales, increasing the data efficiency, reducing the loss to the frauds. All these are the examples of the components what I have discussed sometime back. I have told you, right? So activity, scope, beneficiary, user, value, business value, all that. So these are the major things which normally we need to consider when we are working on PI objectives, when we are writing down the iteration goals or PI programming objectives, all that. So this is all about an high level understanding over reaching towards the iteration goals and PI objectives whenever we are working on agile planning towards reaching the business agility of any enterprise transformation we are taking care of. This is all about this video. If you have any questions in regard to that, if you have any queries, at the same time, if you have any training as well as coaching needs in reference to the agile part, in scaled agile, all that, please reach out to the contact details which will be posted in below to this video. Thank you.